So, hello everyone. My name is Steve Purser, and together with Eva Tasheva, I'm representing Cyen today and the CONFIRMATE project. And our goal is to introduce you to the EU Cyber Resilient Act, what it is and what it's trying to achieve. So, what is it? Well, the CRA, Cyber Resilience Act, aims to safeguard consumers and businesses buying software or hardware products with a digital component. This is very important, must have a digital component. It addresses all levels of cybersecurity, which is present in many products today, the lack of timely security updates for products and software, and the level of information provided to clients, which at the moment is not what it should be. So the CRA should make it more straightforward to identify hardware and software products with the proper level of security and the proper security features. Now, the regulation applies to all products with digital elements. There are a few exceptions. I'll tell you about those in a couple of minutes. But essentially, we are talking about software or hardware products and remote data processing solutions, including software of hardware components being placed on the market separately. Some examples, and I will bring these examples out in terms of the classes they belong to. I will explain what the classes mean in a moment. So in terms of class 1 products, they're things like identity management systems, browsers, password managers, digital certificate issuing software, routers, smart home products, health monitoring, wearables, and SIEM systems. In terms of class 2 products, firewalls would be a good example. And in terms of what we are calling critical products, the smart meter gateway would be a very good example. So what are the exceptions? Well, certainly a number of products which are covered by existing legislation. Examples would include medical devices, aviation, and vehicles. Products that are developed exclusively for national security, defense, or for processing classified information. And situations in which information revealed would be contrary to member state national security, public security, or defense. So these are exceptions on our out of scope. The CRA takes a risk-based approach. This is very important, and it's very consistent with the way that EU regulation has been developing over the last few years. And it introduced a product classification. I referred to it a few seconds ago. So there are essentially 3 product classes based on their risk level and criticality. They are default, important, and critical. Default is obviously the lowest risk. It affects approximately 90% of products with digital elements. And I've given you some examples already, but as I say, smart home devices, printers, this kind of thing. The important class is divided into 2 subclasses. So class 1 is less sensitive than class 2. Class 1 are mainly products that perform some kind of security function. So again, password managers, public key infrastructure, operating systems. Class 2 contains products similar to class 1, but with a higher level of risk. Examples here include hypervisors, firewalls, tamper-resistant equipment. And then the highest level of risk is critical. And again, I've given the example of the smart meter. So let's take a look at this.
4 areas of focus. Rules for the making available on the market of products with digital elements to ensure appropriate cybersecurity. Requirements for the design, development and production of such products together with obligations for economic operators. Requirements for the vulnerability handling process to be put in place by manufacturers. Rules on market surveillance. Who does the regulation apply to? Product with digital elements, defined as a software or hardware product and its remote data processing solutions, including software or hardware components being placed on the market separately. Manufacturers, meaning natural or legal person who develops or manufactures products with digital elements or has products with digital elements designed, developed or manufactured, and markets them under its name or trademark, whether for payment, monetization or free of charge. Importers, meaning a natural or legal person established in the Union who places on the market a product with digital elements that bears the name or trademark of a natural or legal person established outside the Union. Distributors, meaning a natural or legal person in the supply chain, other than the manufacturer or the importer, that makes a product with digital elements available on the Union market without affecting its properties. Open source software stewards, meaning legal person, other than a manufacturer, that has the purpose or objective of systematically providing support on a sustained basis for the development of specific products with digital elements, qualifying as free and open source software and intended for commercial activities, and that ensures the viability of those products. The market surveillance authorities as appointed by the member states in accordance with Article 10 of Regulation (EU) 2019-1020. Key obligations and security requirements. For the private sector, Chapters 2 and 3, together with the annexes, summarize the most important requirements. Chapter 2. Obligations of economic operators and provisions in relation to free and open source software. Chapter 3. Conformity of the product with digital elements. Annex 1. Essential cybersecurity requirements. Annex 2. Information and instructions to the user.
Now that we know what are the roles and who is impacted by the regulation, we can look into the specific obligations for manufacturers. The foremost obligation that is consistent with all European regulations of cybersecurity is risk management. Risk assessment should be based on the intended purpose, on the foreseeable use and expected lifespan of the products with digital elements. Cybersecurity risk should be documented, regularly assessed, addressed, validated, and communicated. This is a novelty when it comes to risk management communication also to the users. Product must be designed, developed, and produced in line with Annex 1, Part 1. This is essentially the essential cybersecurity requirements. They are addressing different measures from objective-driven to specific requirements for the whole lifespan of the product, from the planning, design, development, production, maintenance, and also delivery phase. What is important to remember and comes as a challenge is the supply chain security and due diligence. It is no longer sufficient to look at your own product only. You also have to consider what are the components integrated within, what are the risks and security considerations coming with it. Due diligence also should take place for secure integration of components. Note, this also including free and open source software within your software stack. You understand cybersecurity comes with policies, and those policies and procedures should be established and address vulnerability management as well. Novelty as an obligation for a manufacturer is the coordinated vulnerability disclosure policy, which is mandated. Vulnerability handling requirements would also need to take into consideration at least 5 years of security updates for the product with digital element placed on the European market in the maintenance phase. Documentation of all relevant cybersecurity aspects should also take place. Besides the essential cybersecurity requirements, there are also attestation and transparency requirements coming with the Cyber Resilience Act, such as clear cybersecurity risk information and instructions to the user, conformity assessment procedures, technical documentation, and CE marking assignment. There is also a provision for support of the product. So we discussed the vulnerabilities, be able to dispatch security patches or measures to the products or to the user. for the product's lifespan, or 5 years, whichever is shorter. You also, as a manufacturer, need to make sure that those security updates released are available during the maintenance period, or for at least 10 years, or to the remaining maintenance periods, whichever is shorter. Now, besides integrating and documenting and communicating elements of cybersecurity, there is also a requirement for product with digital elements to notify actively exploited vulnerabilities and severe incidents. The notification happens in stages, and it's clearly defined what is the timeline for realizing this notification. The first step is to become aware. And after you become aware, then you have 24 hours to make a warning for actively exploited vulnerabilities or for severe incidents. By 72 hours, you would then need to provide a formal notification with more details of cause and remediation measures. Here, after the notification starts another timeline which differs between actively exploited vulnerabilities, which need to have subject to final report submitted to authorities within 14 days from the notification, up to 1 month, so 30 days for incident final report.
So Eva has just described the requirements on manufacturers, and the most stringent requirements are indeed on manufacturers, but they're not the only actors. The Act also addresses importers and distributors, and there are requirements on these actors as well. So in the case of importers, they need to ensure compliance with the essential requirements as outlined in Annex 1. Eva just mentioned this. They need to verify that the manufacturer has conducted conformity assessment procedures. They need to confirm that the technical documentation is prepared and ensure that the product bears the CE marking. They also need to provide contact information, include user-friendly information with the product. Remember, one of the goals of the Act is to ensure that consumers are better informed regarding the security of the product. And they need to inform the market surveillance authorities if the product presents a cybersecurity risk. In terms of distributors, similar sort of requirements in a way. Here, there's a requirement to act with due care in relation to the requirements of the regulation, to verify that the product bears the CE marking, to ensure the manufacturer and the importer have fulfilled their obligations, to inform the manufacturer of any vulnerabilities, and in the case of significant risk, to inform the market surveillance authority. So very similar sort of requirements. So let's have a look at these cybersecurity requirements. On the whole, they're very classic, nothing which is particularly new, which is a good thing, because we are aiming to put in practice strong security practices, which have stood the test of time. So I would describe them as, on the whole, classical cybersecurity requirements. They are split into two categories: cybersecurity requirements as such, and also vulnerability handling requirements. Interestingly enough, Articles 13.24 and 57.3 referred to the need for supply chain security, and Eva mentioned this in her previous text. And in Part 2.1 of Annex 2, this is very interesting because it requires organizations to identify and document vulnerabilities and components, including a software bill of materials, also known as the SBOM. The Commission will specify the format of the SBOM by an implementing act. And this, I think, will be a critical element of supply chain security involving software elements for the future. Importantly, there is a link to what is known as the new legislative framework. So what's the new legislative framework? Well, it comes from 2008, and it is essentially the framework which is placed around the CE mark, as you probably know from everyday life. Essentially, it's summarized in two key documents, 2008-765 and 2008-768. So the new legislative framework aims to improve the internal market for goods and to strengthen the conditions for placing a wide range of products on the market. It clarifies the use of the CE marking itself, and it creates a toolbox of measures for use in product legislation. So it improves market surveillance. It establishes rules to protect both customers and professionals from unsafe products. It sets clear and transparent rules for the accreditation of conformity assessment bodies, improves the quality and confidence in the conformity assessment of products itself, clarifies the meaning of the CE marking, and establishes a common legal framework for industrial products. So chapters 3, 4, and 5 of the Cyber Resilience Act explain how the requirements defined by the CRA are to be interpreted in the context of the new legislative framework. So this link is actually very important. Now, as regarding the CE marking itself, the CRA will require products with digital elements to acquire and display a CE marking. This supplements, as I've just said, the existing framework. So now we not only have CE marking for things like toys, electrical equipment, etc. We have them for anything which involves a digital component. So what does this say? The CE marking indicates that a product has an EU declaration of conformity, in which conformity with the relevant requirements is declared, and technical documentation, which contains all the technical details supporting the satisfaction of the requirements. It's important to note that this declaration of conformity is based on a conformity assessment procedure, so it involves a fair amount of work before you get this. And the details of the procedure depend on the product class in which the product is placed. So if there's a presumption of conformity, and that is the case for default products in line with harmonized standards, then basically the standard means that they are European norms, and the idea is to simplify conformity requirements by making reference to more specific requirements in other documents. In other words, the harmonized standards are to some extent decreasing the need for the conformity assessment itself. Formalities are the same as current safety EU regulations, but I'll let you discover this. We're going to walk through this now.
Formalities. Same as current e-safety EU regulations. The inclusion of identification markings are type, batch, serial number on the product, packaging, or accompanying documents. Also, manufacturer's name, contact details, and website on the product, packaging, or accompanying documents. Product conformity is concerned when execution of conformity assessment procedures, and when issuing of an EU declaration of conformity and display of the CE marking. The following documentation is mandatory. First, technical documentation. Then, EU declaration of conformity. And user information and instructions.
Besides the formalities, there are further issues for consideration. Understanding the link between the new legislative framework and the consequences of this link is very important for companies to understand what is the impact of the regulation for their product on the EU market. The software bill of material that Steve presented is also a fairly new tool that organizations across the globe are starting to use to manage their supply chain security. But it becomes now mandatory with the CRA, meaning we have to grow in maturity. And there is guidance of the European Commission of the exact format of the SBOM that is determined by an implementing act. While framework such as ISO 27001, for instance, or the CIS 18 could help you implement large part of the requirements. Maybe you already have them. They would cover a large scope of your requirements under the CRA. But remember, they do not cover all of them. Most importantly, the formalities and the incident notifications that need to be considered, but also coordinated vulnerability disclosure, for instance, is one that is not part of the standard industry standards out there. Another important issue of consideration is the risk of penalties associated with the Cyber Resilience Act non-compliance. Those could have significant monetary impact, the value of the penalty, but also for the reputation of the product and the company operating in the EU market. Let's deep dive into the penalties.
Penalties. Penalties are covered by Chapter 7 of the Act, Confidentiality and Penalties. For manufacturers, administrative fines up to 15 million euros or up to 2.5% of global turnover. For importers and distributors, fines up to 10 million euros or up to 2% of global turnover. Fines of up to 5 million euros or 1% of global turnover for the provision of inaccurate information to the conformity assessment bodies and/or supervisory authorities. Note that the CRA is strongly linked to the new legislative framework, NLF 765/2008 and 768/2008, which introduces the possibility of civil lawsuits.
Now, it is also important to understand the timing, as the Cyber Resilience Act is already in force in the European Union. There is a timeline for implementing the requirements of the Act, starting with the first timeline of start to report actively exploited vulnerabilities and significant incidents, which is by 11th of September 2026, with a little bit more time, just over a year after, to then have all essential cybersecurity requirements apply by 11 December 2027. That being said, while there is a time for the actual penalties enforcement, for instance, remembering that the product design and concept should already take into consideration the CRA requirements, it is now a good time to familiarize yourself with the required and implement it in your product to be ready for market launch as from 2027 in Europe. We would create tools and methodologies to help you to do that, and a good strategy in a good time is worth it and will bring your product faster to the European market.
So thank you, Eva. And that pretty much wraps up what we have to say today. Obviously, we hope that it's been helpful to you. If you would like more information, you can see there's some information behind me on the screen here. So do contact us via the email address that is displayed, and we'd be glad to help you further. Thank you.
Follow also Cyen YouTube channel for the next set of videos we are going to release to deep dive in specific elements of the CRA and our tools and methodologies to help you comply with it. Thank you.